Here we go. College fantasy football wide receiver rankings. We've touched on just the Power Four. Now it's time to expand it. John, we're looking for those league winners. We're going to talk group of five guys. We're going to cover any wide receiver in our top 30 rankings that we haven't already talked about in depth, either in our sleeper shows, our Power Four ranking shows, our live draft shows. We've done a ton of college fantasy football already, but this is sure to be a special episode. And John, coming up this weekend is an even more special event. It's a huge annual event for us. We get a few thousand viewers every year. We're going for 5,000 this year. We're just calling it out right now. And that is the live draft of the College Fantasy Football Kings Classic. Most folks are in Canton, Ohio as part of the FF Expo drafting. And John, a big part of our efforts not only is to show off the industry leading analysts that are a part of this wicked competitive league, but also to raise funds for St. Jude's.
Absolutely, Matt. Over the last 3 years, we have raised over $4,000 for St. Jude's, and that goes to families and children who are battling cancer. Everything is free if you go into the hospital with the child who has cancer. The link is below in the description of the show. I tweet it from my X account all the time, everyone. And on the Kings Classic that next Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m. live on our YouTube channel. If you want, please donate at that time. Matt and I have done over 12 college fantasy football shows this summer, and I know people have enjoyed them by the number of reviews and the number of viewers. So if you have any chance to give anywhere from $5 to $15 to St. Jude's for the CFF King Classics fundraiser, we would really appreciate it, everyone.
Absolutely. And again, that is Saturday, August 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We will be going live. Industry leading analysts from across CFF site, Campus to Canton, RotoWire, NBC Campus. Sports. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm leaving guys off here, but just really college fantasy points. I mean, just everybody that has anything to do with college fantasy football is represented. But let's go ahead, John. Let's get into our top 30 wide receivers, because that is what we are here to really dig in on this episode. And we're going to start here with number 30, and that is Dane Key out of Nebraska. Now, I'm a little bit more bullish on Dane Key than you are. My argument here is that we saw the best of Dane Key in flashes at Kentucky, really poor passing attack that he's been trapped in the last couple of years. And now I think he's going to be the lead wide receiver in this Nebraska offense with Dylan Raiola. There is an Isaiah Hunter there as well, but I like Key as the boundary guy, 8, 9, maybe 10 touchdowns. That's why I've got him a bit higher in my rankings.
And people are going to notice wide receiver rankings are not as similar to NFL, Matt. If you go across the industry and you look at like 3 or 4 different people, and even Matt and myself included, you're going to see a big difference in rankings. I just have questions. Will Dylan Raiola, the quarterback, will he take the step forward? I think I've gotten Key on 1 or 2 drafts this year. I like him. I'm just not in love with them as much as other analysts this year.
And not as much as you're into Trent Walker, the wide receiver out of Oregon State. And I love that you pointed that out, John. These are our consensus rankings, right? So I have him 34. You have him 24. What about Trent Walker has you a little bit more bullish on him?
He's by far the best pass catcher on the Beavers. That's one. He had 123 targets last year, Matt. And I don't know if he'll exceed 123, but I think it's more than reasonable to assume that he gets 100 for Oregon State. We know they're a conservative offense. We know they have a defensive-minded coach, but Trent Walker is the guy in the passing game. He only scored 2 touchdowns. Matt, touchdowns are fickle. If he goes to 6 to 8 touchdowns with 100 targets, he will score a bunch of fantasy points. And I also ranked him high because of the floor. He just gets you nice, boring, consistent points. But you know what? A 12-point game with a touchdown becomes an 18-point game. So I'm banking a little bit on upward touchdowns.
Absolutely. And at number 28 here, we're going to Nick Senecal. It's the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors offense, right? We're buying into the scheme. We're going to be talking about one of his teammates a little bit later on. But for Senecal, 63 receptions last year, over 700 yards, a little bit lower of an ADOT, right? Maybe a little bit less touchdown upside. Is this a floor play here at 28?
Absolutely. You got to buy into the run and shoot offense. If Micah Alejandro, the quarterback, hits Matt, they're going to have multiple receivers who do well. Senecal, I don't think he's as good as the wide receiver we're going to talk to later, but I do think he's underrated, Matt, because he was actually the better fantasy producer last year than in 2023 for the Rainbows.
This next guy, I'm pretty bullish on. I've gotten some nice exposure to him, in the 10, 11, 12th round even. I mean, he's falling off a little bit, and that's Hudson Clement. He's with the Illini this season. But, John, last year in Morgantown for West Virginia, 51 receptions, 741 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Relative to a pretty broken passing attack,
yeah,
that's exciting to me. We both like Luke Altmaier. I think it's going to be a pretty balanced / pass leaning offense, even with Brett Bielema. I definitely think you have a formula for success here.
Oh, there's no question. Clement landed in a much better spot than people think. And I could argue that the Illini are in line to win 9 to 10 games, Matt. They bring back I think the entire offensive line.
Yeah.
And the most offensive production of any team in the Big Ten. They are loaded. My only concern is the coach, Matt. If they're up 21 to 10, what are the Illini going to do? Run the football.
That's fair.
That's my only concern is the ceiling, but I do like Hudson Clement to set career highs this year.
All right. I like that call a lot. Next up here, coming in at number 26, is Kevin Coleman out of Mizzou. We've talked about him in the Sleepers episode. I've identified him in a few Devy and CFF articles over at rookiebigboard.com, which is a newsletter. The link will be in the episode description. If anybody wants to subscribe to the newsletter, that is completely free. Again, it'll be in the episode description. I highly encourage you to do that. So we won't spend time talking about Kevin Coleman, but we will spend some time digging into Ted Hurst, the wide receiver out of Georgia State. This is a pretty interesting one for me. Hurst overall last season, just shy of 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, and he had some really big games. 4 games over 100 receiving yards. He had a multi-touchdown game against Vanderbilt last season. So this is a guy, John, even when Georgia State plays Ole Miss or plays Memphis or Vanderbilt this year, you don't have to shy away from taking him out of your lineup.
No, I like Ted Hurst a lot, and he's grown on me since about early March. And if you remember, he entered the transfer portal. Let's just say he dipped his toes in it. And I was worried that he was going to go to a program where he might not be the alpha male in the passing game, but he decided to return to the Panthers, Matt, and he is by far the number 1 target magnet for Georgia State this year. I think he's got 1,100-yard season, double-digit touchdowns written all over him. My only concern is I'm not in love with the quarterback or the team itself, but the target should be there. Just how productive will he be? Most really, how accurate will the quarterback be?
Yeah, that is fair. It always gets a little dicey whenever you get into the Sun Belt and you're relying on some quarterback play, right? Nothing dicey, though, John, with the resources that we have for our CFF players over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. And I got to tell you, John, it's been pretty cool to see. The CFF-specific folks have been flooding in this offseason. They want to get access to our rankings. We're just going through the top 30 wide receivers here. We have the top 75 by position. We have that broken down Power 4 only. We have that broken down full 136 FBS. You can get personalized advice for your CFF drafts and your rosters and your weekly start sit plays in our Discord. So we got a lot for you there. It's just $5 a month. The link will be in the episode description. And on top of all that CFF action, John, you also get Devy rankings, Dynasty rankings, personalized advice, like I said, articles, videos that are patron only, lots of good stuff over there. And I got to say, some good stuff here going on in the Baylor offense as well. Our
Oh,
first player up in this next group is Josh Cameron, the wide receiver out of Baylor. I think Baylor is everybody's kind of dark horse, no longer a dark horse in the Big 12, right? Of course, you've got that good passing attack with Sawyer Robertson, who we've talked about a lot. We're bullish on. Well, he's got to throw touchdowns to somebody, John. And Josh Cameron caught 10 last year.
yeah, I really have liked Josh Cameron. Early in the draft season, I was getting a ton of Josh Cameron. People have kind of figured him out that he's a number one guy. I believe he's a fifth-year receiver, Matt, with special teams chops. And there's a little buzz in the NFL community, in the draft scouting community about him. I'm really excited to watch this young man in the Baylor Bears offense.
The next guy up here, I'm pushing up his ranking a little bit. And it is projection, but I'm willing to lean into the Ryan Wingo, right? Because I trust my eyes. Last year, he only got 29 receptions, John, but 16.3 yards per reception. He had 2 touchdowns, 470 yards. Also, what I think is a little underrated with Ryan Wingo, he had 100 rushing yards on just 5 carries. He averaged 20 yards a rush. You have some good vacated production, right? Going off to the NFL from this offense. So there's a huge opportunity here for Ryan Wingo to step up and maybe catch 60, 65 balls. Maybe he runs the ball 15 times on the ground. You piece these things together in one of the best offenses in the country, and I'm willing to lean into the risk.
Matt, if you told me that Ryan Wingo was guaranteed 100 targets, I would 100% agree with you. I actually think he's the best wide receiver on the Longhorns. My concern is when they brought in Emmett Mosley from Stanford, they're kind of loaded. We like Jack Endries, and they have some pass-catching running backs. So I just wonder, are they going to spread it out? But I love the talent. It just is the number of targets he will get.
Yeah, well, you don't have to wonder if Junior
No.
Vander Ross is getting targets, right? Because Junior Vander Ross is the X in the Toledo offense. 85 receptions last year, 950 receiving yards. Maybe the question is touchdowns, just 5 touchdowns for Vander Ross last year. But he's coming back. He's got his starting quarterback back. We talked about the Toledo offense, a pretty healthy amount here. I love the best of the MAC, right? The top tier of the MAC. There's a real offensive advantage. So I'm big on Vander Ross, and I just cannot wait to watch Toledo this year.
I agree with you. And, one of the things I like to do in July, Matt, is I go to the Barnes and Noble and I sit and I read the college fantasy or college magazines, right? And I like to see what the other people think. And the Toledo Rockets are basically the top team in the MAC, according to all of the magazines out there. I agree with you. I love this offense. They're going to put the ball in the air. He's had 200 targets the past 2 seasons. You're right. He's only scored 9 touchdowns. But, Matt, what if he gets to 10 this year, which is clearly possible in the MAC with the best offense in the conference?
All right, next up here, we have Caleb Douglas out of Texas Tech. He's coming in at 21. Douglas, really productive season last year for the Red Raiders after transferring over from Florida in 2024, 60 receptions, 877 yards, 6 touchdowns. John, I love the start to the season for Caleb Douglas. Arkansas, Pine Bluff, then Kent State, then you get Oregon State, Utah, but then Houston, Kansas. I mean, you really have to get into, mid to late October before there's a matchup where Caleb Douglas isn't projected to absolutely smash.
And if you studied Texas Tech over this offseason, Matt, they've invested a lot of NIL money into their roster. And Caleb Douglas is a transfer from Florida. So you have a young man who was signed by an SEC program. I think he's the best receiver on the roster. Now, they're pretty deep. The Red Raiders tend to be deep, but he had 101 targets last year, Matt. And now that we have Baron Morton healthy and back on the field, I love Caleb Douglas even more. And that schedule, it just is too easy, brother.
I am so fascinated by David Amador the second for UTSA. I mean, for all intents and let's call it 4 games, John. Technically 5 games. Let's call it 4 games that he was healthy and he played in at the end of last season. And in 4 games, 30 receptions, 370 yards, and a touchdown. He's got Owen McCown coming back, so a veteran, experienced quarterback. You do have to lean into some projection here, some volatility, but it could pay off big time.
It is definitely projection. And the Roadrunners with Jeff Traylor, Matt, since COVID in 2020, when I started watching them on a regular basis, this is a really good offensive team. They got off to a slow start last year because they couldn't really figure out the quarterback. We mentioned McNown, but he didn't really take over the offense till about week 5 or 6. Amador looks like the guy in this explosive offense. It is projection, but I'm willing to take it. And the American Conference doesn't trot out a lot of defensive stalwarts out there. So I think UTSA has a really good chance of being the best offensive unit in that conference.
We always love a little hype for the meep around here. At 19, we have Joseph Williams. This is your guy, man. I think you're pushing Joseph Williams up in overall ADP for across the industry this offseason. So I'll let you just take the floor here on the Colorado wide receiver.
Sometimes, Matt, the eyeball test tells you about a player. And I watched a lot of Joseph Williams as a true freshman last year at Tulsa. And Matt, every time I watched him, I was really impressed. And I was excited about him going back to the Golden Hurricanes to play. He ends up moving over to Colorado. I think this is a much better offensive environment for the young man. I do think he's the most talented wide receiver on the roster. Now, there's different reports, and I understand. I do think they're going to run out 3 receivers. The Miller, they're not brothers, but I just call them the Miller brothers. They're going to get targets. But, Matt, this offense, they can't run the ball. They might throw the ball 650 times in the Big 12 this year. I love Joseph Williams. He's big. He's strong. He's got great hands. And watch some of the clips from the spring practices. He was dominant for the Buffaloes.
Yeah, we got Williams, Miller, and Miller there. I feel like we need a law firm nickname here, right? Law firm of Williams, Miller, Miller. All right, let's get into our next group of wide receivers here. And we're going to start with Ole Miss wide receiver Caden Lee, who we have a bit of a gap on here, John. But I've gotten a healthy amount of Caden Lee. I think you could get him, at ADP that kind of matches more the ranking that I have him at. So 57 receptions last year, 874 yards, 2 touchdowns, right? But of course, the top 2 wide receivers from Ole Miss off to the NFL, or at least trying to make an NFL roster. So a lot of vacated targets here, and you're expecting Lee to be the main guy here.
Yeah, I'm banking on vacated targets. I think he's going to be that slot receiver. He's a little undersized, right? Deshaun Stribling is more of the classic outside X type of receiver. I believe Caden Lee will run the vast majority of his routes in the slot. And I believe in Lane Kiffin. I've just had too much success banking on the Lane Kiffin system. Now, this is really important what you just said to our viewers today. Find discrepancies in ADP and rankings. Just because I like Caden Lee at number 8, you probably don't have to take him that early. But when maybe 15, 16, 17 receivers are off the board, then you can jump in. Or, Matt likes him at 26. If he lasts to 26, you absolutely have to take him. So use rankings and ADP. I think it's more successful in college fantasy football than NFL fantasy football because you will find bigger discrepancies.
Absolutely. This next guy, John, we're more focusing on power or non-power 4 guys, but I mentioned I want to talk about in detail the guys who we just haven't gotten a chance to get into yet. And Eugene Trey Wilson out of Florida, he's one of these guys. And quite frankly, John, I don't know what to do with the guy, right? Excellent freshman year, a really strong sample size in the first 4 games of 2024 before suffering an injury. And I trust that he's going to be a big part of this offense. But I like the freshman wide receivers in Dallas Wilson and Vernal Brown, right? I like J. Michael Sturdivant. I like the running game balanced out. So overall, I think they're going to pass the ball more. I think it's going to be a little bit more balanced. And just stuck in the back of my head, John, is still that really low ADOT from his true freshman season. So this is where I rank him. I can't rank him any lower, but I also haven't gone out and gotten a ton of exposure to him.
I have a lot of exposure because he does tend to fall at times. And I've gotten him as late as round 6. And I'm sorry. Yeah. He, as an SEC receiver who popped his freshman year, to me, round 6 is just a really nice value. Now, I've reached up to round 5 if I need a wide receiver, depending on roster construction. But I agree, Matt. His freshman ADOT was a concern, as well as his yards per reception. He only had 8.8. But last year in that small sample size, Matt, his ADOT went up and he averaged 14 yards per reception.
Yes.
I think the young man was taking really good steps forward. The injuries just derailed his season. So I think he bounces back. And I think Florida, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I think they're kind of a sneaky team in the SEC. I think they're pretty good when you look at their totality of the roster.
It can be really tough when you are in the Devy space as far in as I am and scouting these players for NFL draft purposes. And, I see a name like Carnell Tate and I see the Ohio State offense. It's so easy for me to just want to shoot these guys up the rankings. And so what I tend to find, John, is I actually over adjust in a negative way for college fantasy football because I over check my bias. But I think even having Carnell Tate for 15 for me and 16 overall for us, man, it still feels kind of low. It's really the Julian Sayin part of the equation that's giving me this hesitancy that he's not also a top 10 CFF guy like his teammate Jeremiah Smith, who we will get to. Is that where the hesitation is for you with Carnell Tate?
Absolutely. I just have not seen it from Julian Sayin as a quarterback over the long haul of 12 games in the Big Ten, Matt. And if he slips a little bit, or if the coaching staff decides to protect him, I think the passing game completely goes through Jeremiah Smith, right? It would be malfeasance not to feed Jeremiah Smith. You're going to take your targets from other receivers, right? You can't say, oh, don't throw it to Jeremiah Smith, right? So I do think the number of targets are a concern. And even though I like Julian Sayin, and we both have talked about him, Matt, there is concern. Is he the real deal? We've seen enough young men not live up to the hype once they get on the field.
Next guy up here is Corey Rucker. I like Rucker. I've been getting a pretty healthy exposure to him. 69 receptions last year for just north of 1,000 yards for Arkansas State. 15.5 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns. You might notice a trend. What I'm looking for in wide receivers. I love guys with a good, proven level of production, and they're returning with their quarterback, right? And so it could be tough in the group of 5. And so Corey Rucker, he's got Jalen Rayner back as the starting quarterback. We really like Rayner. He can get it done through the air and with his legs, but clearly the chemistry was there between these two guys last year. Rucker is going for his 6th year at the college level, so he's certainly experienced. In the mid rounds, you could do much worse than Corey Rucker.
It is not going to be often moving forward with the transfer portal. Well, now maybe things change. We know that. But to get a G5 quarterback and a G5 receiver who've been very productive and come back to their team, Matt, is going to be difficult to find. And when you look at the targets, he has 212 targets over the past 2 seasons and 9 touchdowns. And he averages, if I look at my quick math, he's averaging about 17 yards a reception. Matt, Corey Rucker's in a smash spot for Arkansas State.
Makai Lemon is an interesting one for me. I've got him at 25. You've got him a bit higher at 18, but just the way everybody else shakes out, he ends up a little bit higher for us here. Lemon is an interesting one. 52 receptions, 760 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. And I think that's where I'm a little stuck on him. I also just really like Jacoby Lane, right? And Jacoby Lane, I think, had 8 or 9 receiving touchdowns.
I think.
Yeah, and so I think Lane is really going to be the X guy. I have some questions still about where Jaden Mayava shakes out in all of this. So this is another one. I kind of put him in that Eugene Wilson territory, right? You can't put him too low, but I haven't gotten a ton of them.
I have a lot of Makai Lemon, Matt. I am really high on this young man.
The talent is amazing.
He's an amazing player. And I'm going to make a little bit of projection on a coach here. I think Lincoln Riley has to win this year.
Yeah.
We talked about the USC schedule. It's rather easy for a Big Ten. I mean, the chips have fallen in the favor of the Trojans. And I know he spread the ball around for the most part. But Matt, when I look at this roster, there are 2 studs on this roster, Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. If Lincoln Riley wants to win 10 games, I think he's got to pepper these 2, stop this nonsense, get both young men over 100 targets, and I get that's a projection. But Matt, when coaches reach a point where they have to win, right, they're not blowing people out. He's coming off a down season. Don't you want the ball in this young man's hands as often as possible? I think he's going to return kicks for him. I do. I think you're going to have the type of player. We are going to use him every way. I'm really bullish. I think he's an outside first-round draft pick. I have a second-round grade right now, but that's how bullish I am. And I'm taking a leap of faith that Riley realizes this is my guy. I need 10 wins. How do I get 10 wins, Matt? I give the ball to Makai Lemon.
All right. I like it here. And Deion Burke's coming in at 13. We have talked about Burke, so just a quick comment on him here, right? You're balancing out, again, another situation of talent versus volume. We've talked about Mateer a lot. We're a little bit lower on Mateer in the passing offense overall relative to the industry consensus here.
You know what I'm finding out? The national media loves Oklahoma, dude. They're trying to drag everyone into the Sooner Nation, man. And I just look at the schedule. I look at the talent. I look at the scheme. And I'm not saying that they're not going to be competitive, and I think they will. But, man, I just don't see 10 or 11 wins for the Sooners this year.
All right, getting into our top 12 here. We had to get a Rainbow Warrior on the thumbnail of this episode. So we have Ashlock on the cover. Over the last couple seasons, 140 receptions, again, over the last 2 seasons here. Just about 1,500 receiving yards, just about 1,600 receiving yards, I should say. 15 touchdowns, low yards per reception, right? But especially if you're playing in a full PPR format, I mean, it's wheels up on him.
Yeah, I'm a big Ashlock guy in this offense. Now, I understand, like, if you want to invest in the Rainbows and you want the receiver who's maybe cost less draft capital, I'm okay with going for Nick Senecal. I get it. But me, I kind of like Ashlock where he's fallen in ADP. I get a lot of him as my second receiver. And I really like the ceiling. I mean, Matt, he's had 236 targets in the last 2 years.
Hey.
How is that going to change? He should have 110 targets minimum, and I'm betting on volume here, and I think he's pretty good. I mean, for Mountain West receiver, he's a good receiver.
Absolutely. Number 11 here, we have Chase Sowell coming in from East Carolina, where he caught 34 balls for 670 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. The Cyclone fans might be interested to see that he had 19.9 yards per reception for the Pirates last year. But of course, John, the juicy part of this, right, is you have Jalen Noel off to the NFL. You have Jaden Higgins off to the NFL. You have Rocco Beck, the quarterback, back in business, right? You don't have a running back that you're super hype on. So he's the guy.
And Matt Campbell has a stereotype Matt. He loves these big, strong, fast receivers who can attack the defense. And I watch a lot of American Conference football. And Soul was another young man like Joseph Williams, who I was really impressed with at East Carolina last year. You mentioned 19.9 yards per reception. He only had 58 targets, Matt. I think that target number goes back. If the Cyclones had a change at quarterback, I might be a little bit more concerned. But Rocco Beck is basically coming back for his third year behind center. And it's the same offensive scheme. And Matt Campbell has found his stereotypical wideout in Jay Soul. So I'm all in.
Love to see it. Love to see it. TJ Moore, you're going to have a lot of options if you want to get into the Clemson offense for CFF purposes, right? And, certainly you look at where Clemson is relative to the rest of the ACC, it really does feel like it's a tier above, right? And so you have week 1 LSU, and then you really don't have another game on the Clemson schedule that's going to scare you, right? Like Troy,
No, they
Georgia
might
Tech,
run the
Syracuse.
table if they beat LSU.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at a team that is bound for the college football playoff, right? And the defense is really good, but the offense is going to be leading the way. So TJ Moore is a true freshman last year, 45 receptions, 650 yards, 5 touchdowns. We're going to talk about one of his teammates a little bit later, but certainly with Moore, there's a big play downfield threat.
Yeah, I love TJ Moore and the talent. I think we're going to talk a lot about him in the, let me think now, in the spring of 2027. He's only a sophomore. He's got 2 more years on campus. Matt, this is just a ranking because he's got another teammate and they're loaded. I'd love to put him in the top 10, but I think a little bit the ball will be spread around for the Tigers here. But I absolutely love the talent. And you know what? I actually got more TJ Moore than our other Clemson receiver because he comes in a later round where I'm looking for wide receivers.
Absolutely. We have talked extensively about Elijah Surratt. So I'll point you to our Power 4 only wide receiver video. We're getting some, we got the scouting notebook right up on him as well because he's a legitimate NFL draft prospect. So you've got some other areas for us to get in depth on Elijah Surratt. And we've talked about Eric McAllister as well, but I do feel like it's worth touching again on this TCU offense. 760 yards for McAllister after transferring from Boise last year, just about 20 yards per reception, 5 touchdowns. TCU, for me, a little bit more of the dark horse. We're talking about Baylor. Everyone's on Baylor. I'm a little bit more on TCU because I like their offense. The defense is bad. The running game's not good. So the passing attack, experienced Josh Hoover and Eric McAllister, that's going to be a big piece of this puzzle.
And we've talked about how much we like Josh Hoover. I think he's going to put the ball up a lot this year because you mentioned there's questions about the running game. Matt, at Boise State 2 years ago in 9 games, McAllister had 88 targets. Last year in 13 games for the Horned Frogs, he only had 57. I think he gets over 100 targets this year for TCU. I love him.
Yeah, another guy who could be at 100 targets easily, right, is Denzel Boston from Washington. The way Jed Fish used him, clear top target. I want to say the X, but for a guy who's 6'4", 210, he actually oddly doesn't play like much of an X.
He's like an inside Z receiver, I think.
It was the weirdest film eval of any of the wide receivers. And if you want to hear more on that, I'm going to get into it on the podcast feed this week. So that's a Rookie Big Board podcast feed. So I won't get too into the draft evaluation on this episode, but it was kind of a funky one. But at least for CFF purposes, 100 targets, that feels safe. 1,000 yards, that feels pretty realistic. In 9 touchdowns last season, we certainly could improve on that.
Yeah, and I think he'll take a step forward. He was injured the second half of the year. It's really a tale of two seasons. You look at his first 6 games and he's wildly productive. And you look at the second half, then they changed quarterbacks to the young man, Demon Williams.
That was a
So
big one.
I think if he's healthy and the offense stays the same, I think easily 110 targets this year.
All right. Well, let's get into our top 6 now in the home stretch here. And we do have one group of 5 player to talk about that broke into the top 6. But first, I want to go back to that Clemson offense, John. And you kind of you jumped it perfectly earlier because I wanted to talk about what's the value, right? What's the exposure? What's the right price for Antonio Williams? Because I have seen him. I mean, first 2 rounds he's not going past the mid-second round in the drafts that I'm going into. I've got a little Antonio Williams, but not so much as TJ Moore. And what I will point out is you can even go further down the Clemson depth chart.
Oh yeah,
and there's Tyler Brown's going to get his, and
Brian
so there's the transfer that they want to work in the red zone. I've heard. I'm forgetting his name. Adesimo. So there's options here.
There's no question, but I do believe Antonio Williams is going to be the one peppered with most targets, Matt. And I think he scored last year, one of the only players to score on a reception, a rush, and he threw a touchdown pass.
I saw that when watching his film. It was a good throw.
It was a good throw. And the Tigers use him in unique ways, Matt. If you watched a lot of Clemson, he's clearly the guy that they want to get the ball in the hands. I think when they're in clutch, 3rd and 6, right? 3rd and 9, they like to get the ball to Williams. They do, I think, more creative stuff. The only concern with Williams, I think his ceiling is limited because of the talent in the wide receiver core. So that's my only concern. I could make an argument for he's higher, but I like this young man. He's starting his 4th season on campus in the same offense that Dabo Swinney's been there, right? For the most part. I think he's a smash for, 1,100 yards, anywhere from 8 to 12 touchdowns.
John, I'm consistently seeing Easton Messer go at least a round later than Antonio Williams. Like for me, I'm seeing him go off the board in the 3rd round, but we have him ranked higher. I've got him 5. You've got him 4. Messer is coming over from Western Kentucky. So that's why I apologize on the slide. I try to get the updated uniforms, but would you believe it, John? Not some high quality photos coming out of Florida Atlantic spring practice here. So unfortunately, we have Messer here in his Western Kentucky uniform, but a good reminder, right? He's coming over with the quarterback. He's coming over with the new offense. It's a whole lot of new, but it's also not. It's an interesting spot.
Well, I would say this is where like the casual CFF fan varies from the CFF expert or rankings, right? Because in a lot of leagues, I do it with other experts, and he goes in the 2nd round, and he's actually been pushed up in the 1st round. But obviously, those of us who are system guys, right? You mentioned this is the Zach Kittley system. And they bring over the quarterback and Messer from Western Kentucky. So I get it. If you get him in the 3rd or 4th round of a casual draft, Matt, that is an absolute steal.
Yeah.
I bet at the Kings Classic, he doesn't leave the 1st round, Matt.
Ooh, well, we'll have to see because we're drafting at the top. So
yeah, we're drafting. I mean, I don't think he makes us to us on the 2nd round.
Well, I'm excited to see that. Well, I wanted to finish off this episode, John, in a very similar way that we did with the quarterbacks and the running backs. We've talked a lot about all 4 of these. I'm going to call these guys the top tier, right? Jeremiah Smith, he's kind of on his own. But for the most part, these are the guys, Smith, Tyson, Coleman, Ryan Williams, that you're paying up for, right? So I'm curious just to hear from your experience this offseason. Where is your exposure going to with these 4 guys?
Coleman is my most owned.
Same.
Because the value on Coleman in the 2nd round, especially if I go running back in the 1st round, and it is a projection, right? We've seen snippets last year as a freshman of how productive he can be, but I think we haven't seen it, right? We've seen it with Tyson and Jeremiah Smith. We know how good they are, but they're going off the board in the top 5 picks, man.
Yeah.
So if you're not in the top 5, you don't even have a chance at him. And there are other people who aren't as high on Coleman as you and I. So I have a ton of Coleman. I have as much of Jeremiah Smith and Jordan Tyson as I've had an opportunity. I think I have them on 2 or 3 teams each, because it does depend on where you're drafting, right? You don't always get, but when I have the opportunity, I will take 1 to 2 young men at pick 3 or 4. The guy I have, I don't think I have one pick, and this is crazy that you made me think about this. I don't think I have Ryan Williams.
No, Ryan. Wow.
It's not that I'm against it. He seems to go really like end of the first, early second. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's good or bad. I've been drafting earlier in general, right? I have the top 5 picks in general. And Williams doesn't make it back to the second round that late. But I am a little worried about that second half. But I love the talent. And he's going to still be productive. But that's why I have him at 5.
Listen, folks, if you have watched through this entire video, you've watched the full running backs, you've watched the quarterbacks, our sleepers. If you're watching all of these CFF videos and you are not a part of patreon.com/rookiebigboard, I don't know what you're doing, right? Because we got our top 75. We've got personalized advice. We're just cracking the surface here. So you got to head on over there. It's well worth $5 a month. The link will be in the episode description. But you're going to want to at the very least, make sure you're subscribed to this page. And you're going to want to make sure that you have those alerts on, those notifications, because you're going to want to jump in the chat when we go live at 10 a.m. again on Saturday, August 9th. The chat, by the way, on YouTube is always so fun. We have hundreds that join us live. I think we got well over 300 or 400 at one time last year. So I want to break that. I want to get over 1,000 at one time. John, plenty of folks watch it later on, but you're going to want to make sure you keep an eye out for that College Fantasy Football Kings Classic Draft. That's what's coming up next. But we have a whole ton of college fantasy football content planned for you leading up and all the way through the 2025 season. So make sure you're subscribed, and we're going to be back real soon with some more college fantasy football action.